all. 13, DOJ has indicated Rule 9 interfere that is subject to change on legal places here and I've been told that some marijuana is illegal under federal law. The enforcement will always remain a potential conflict for federal tax code denies the petition of taxes security converting that can put dispensaries out of operation. Banks will have this prosecution cash on the basis just for money laundering, evasion, robbery. Research remains very as more states move, problems will get worse. Many are forced to the black market. The industry remains colorblind. It's for the government to make sure states, businesses, and individuals act in an environment that is consistent. Laws Congress should remove it from the CSA and create a regulatory framework. The plan dismantles cartels. Two internal links. First, revenue status quo allows them to pay off local police and recruit for the military, but the plan solves shifts markets domestically crime break and 90 politicians to get the states with the demand and order Mexican for and control the first countries militias operate outside the laws. Military is here and cartels provide financial tools for Mexico armed forces. Cartels offer 26,000 compared to those logistics. Sorry, cartels besides offer private within the army. Cartels recruit from the military special forces because officers in Mexico is unlike the result. Second is law enforcement. The DA is putting the tons of resources into marijuana right now, but the plan allows them to allocate resources into other drug sale and for the opposition with the DA to the legalization. So they're just saying part of the people do not want to have government spend time, money, and resources. It's time to realign strategic thinking. It's also in the interests of the DA. Survival remove the designation of marijuana for directing federal resources more present danger tax revenue can provide the DEA must use DEA solves cartels are right. In 19, the impact of arrests and extradition. So other action checks the Jupiter cartels founder of the DCA agency is a global reach work with the counterparts to adjust violence to sharing of intel and joint investigations. He is well positioned to find assassinate attack on the command and control of trafficking organizations. Cartel violence calls the state collapse and tax U.S. military response months. In 14 months, Mexico spread South Africa conflict remains by North within Turkey and warfare, assassination, terrorism, domestic use military powers, that is determined to gain reputation. Other cartels are expanding the operation without undisciplined recruits. Chances of Mexico's violent pursuits might be a partnership between traffickers and terrorist groups in action ties with the hospitals goes out there for automated systems just like the U.S. as long as the continues to get chances of this cartel launch bombings are helped as well. The U.S. would consider military action. President will face immense pressure that using military against cartels causes collapse and security collapse. Mexican fails a collapses to Germany becomes a proxy for Russia, Iran, and China to fill in power back to peace and love to fail state and Mexico will provide for Indians with the power to go attacks to exist if there's American natures. Russia might try to acquire great emphasis due to Russia's drive for power. China's aspiration to become great economic power is evident, which may attempt to counter the military of the U.S. The Chinese way to take advantage of Mexico to expand Mexico accept assistance for trying to say this was a problem for security. Chinese expansions may provide leverage for the Chinese on Korea and Taiwan as good influences would provide China with greater power. This one undoubtedly places the U.S. as a disadvantage and military readiness also every threat but decline. Emboldened travels and causes miscalculation arms races to escalate brands. 18th century American policy preventing strategic bankruptcy and market companies global pharmacy on raffling in Europe, East Asia, but the slashing on dominance constituted hard power back and averting unstable multipolarity and nuclear proliferation, catastrophic terrorism, such as the military predispositions under right alliance commitments preserve substantial information global norms reflect hard power alliances need superiority to share values purposely right alliances credibility some of the regions of rivals will be important in international crisis and address low level security power competition high security in Europe and East Asia comparative weakness of agriculture China contesting global norms such as non-negotiation and navigation China carried build up of its position proportions more competitive environment North Korea is growing nuclear arsenal around provides nuclear threshold state proxy forces across Islamic State discipline military capabilities operational demands on U.S. forces technology and capability gaps closing past fifth generation capabilities need to be perpetuated America's overmatch challenges multiple confronts where states and power competition the first array of threats and the withdrawal from hegemony to multipolarity causes great power war, nuclear proliferation, terrorism, racist nationalism, and seeds the world to Russia and China, right? And 20 quarters of forces from throughout calling for surgery of global return to pay pursuing will be given for medicinal for the use alliances and for present discharge with these with regional security in Europe and Asia by nuclear proliferation power right wing nationalists and aggravate major power conflict Africans with the world and right now proposing changes they're calling for the wholesale replacement the United States needs not and disagreeing about progressive thinkers of trying to return to it now play the consequences of American withdrawal make a more case against the current grand strategy for sanctions reject that regional security competition will intensify the dislodging does not let your pull back is elected to vote of regional powers Russia but has great zone warfare Japan to increase its defense capabilities with China nuclear proliferation and others would acquire nuclear weapons nuclear materials can handle with the anti-terrorism world and isolation retro for heightened nations xenophobia and many right-wing national security competition from Russia but such an order is inherently unstable withdrawing from Taiwan would plunge cross-shape relations against Southern Korea would oscillate regional re-engagement is creating uncertainty policing the rest of the regulation, which was particularly suited when the United States finds itself in competition with their ambition, because increasingly relying on professional physics by facial recognition technology and artificial intelligence Beijing as experts in the extent to find the crackdown is the United States is showing deterrence that prevents this competition from the governments of the military demand advocates of return for aim to weaken both the U.S. military and U.S. alliances cooperation for effectively conceive victory to China authoritarian states. Nuclear war causes extinction. That's bomb in 15 nuclear war can cause global environmental effects, including precipitation and increased ultraviolet radiation. The severe consequences of humanity's impacts are uncertain to understand the level of uncertainty about the possible effect way by the probability smoke from nuclear providers from search of fire into the causing nuclear to last longer. 2 groups have found similar results using different level of the results are showing like severe global famine could assume nuclear nuclear more severe impacts as these outbreaks and violent conflicts, but the news of is really compared to those of future generations nuclear murder could cause human extinction and the possibility of human extinction nuclear but to very large and serious stress. Thus, the plan the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform. The policing and sentencing of criminal statutes pertaining to the possession and distribution of marijuana always value and preserving life potential and other fear of people lead lives not worth them make they believe they do something if they for their future others will be better most of the lives of them for argument assume their lives are not worth filming. This is an answer what we should do. We should not convince ourselves that many people suffer. Util is good. GPP and 17 therapies worth equals 99% worth equals 100% of 2 or 3 is much greater. Earth will remain for 3 another billion years. Access 100 catastrophes would destroy the future. First reductions under emphasis in indigenous global benefits of wealth, the invisibility of the problem based on poor fear that in the current generation and present actual future. Bear the cost of compromise lead people to underestimate residents there have been your catastrophes of magnitude. People become numb with the numbers of decision makers. Your system with their problems less severe by orders of magnitude. Scenario analysis is pedagogically valuable, enhances creativity and self-reflexivity, deconstructs out of bias and flaw ontological assumptions, enables imagination and creation of alternate futures. By Law 16, the corporate for relevance has been the one component research programs are both relevance and our analysis and government decision makers and futures is beyond control, but the different analysis to producing serving corporate and corporate against our analysis, not the diseases we characterize in our analysis, should exposition should start to consider alternative scenarios are not forecast based the near patterns are not expert predictions of the decision makers for practice controlled by existing models and cognitive processes, imagining alternative future worlds where structure analytical processes enables policy makers to adopt something for participants and strategies for avoiding competitors with creativity or furthering assumptions to prevent scholars from understanding the point of realism is true in this instance. Pretending that there isn't makes war and structural violence more likely. Independent of the entire epistemology is good and threats are real. They are in 14 if humans were more than there will be fewer words. This assumption is false at the root of that's there's a human code is not deficit moral disposition but not for the range with the prevents that called lack of basis, but the positions are correct in recognizing the your cause of the which is resulting from nuclear capability structural issues rather than capability comes to the fact that other political complex states are the only relevant actors and can be for power more considerations are secondary with the states against security and survival political use of conducted to favor of security of morality even if human beings are not to be completely enhanced human kind myself to face some scary scenarios more enhancement will not provide political leaders to dismantle nuclear weapons as long as the structure of politics imposes them to see cooperates and present as possible and if these in the future leaders will fail to cooperate and engage in wars. This is likely to happen even if the Jews become less egoistic and power-seeking, adjusting nature to the survival of human communities by engineering is unlikely to of the expected results. Reform inevitable. With in 13, that is some sort of reforms that is capable of being influenced more inclusive policies such a perspective of social activists in terms of racial politics. The right was able to roll back some authority into the right movement with the ones with the right good achieve racial condition have changed major reforms proved irreversible. Mark the last card at irreversible.
Okay, cool. Are y'all good for cross-ex?
Let me get a drink real quick, then I'm good.
Okay, for sure.
Good.
What is the impact of scenario analysis?
The Barma evidence lists a couple of impacts. It says this is good for subjectivity because it allows us to imagine things that aren't conceivable in the status quo, but it allows us to actualize that future through having discussions about the causal pathways that would result from them.
Okay, sure. What's the alternative to American hegemony?
Hegemony.
And how do you know that it's bad?
Okay, the right evidence indicates a withdrawal of U.S. hegemony would lead to Russia and China fill-in, which would lead to hotspot wars, mass global violence, and authoritarian crackdown in nationalism.
Okay, cool. What's the warrant for realism being true in the context of COVID and China specifically?
The Diageo evidence talks about how realism is inevitably the way that states organize, so it doesn't really matter that structural factors have changed. It makes a claim that realism is how states will interact so long as they have nuclear weapons and so long as they are led.
Okay, sure. Then I guess like your cards talk about terrorism. What is it?
What is terrorism? The way I don't know like what specific cards you're referring to, but the way the cartels cards are probably referring to it is within the context of actors fighting against the Mexican government and causing deaths of civilians.
Okay, sure. Then I guess how does the 1AC Speech Act engage in politics?
It is intrinsically political, and the plan is a political action.
Is that political action good?
Yes.
Why?
Why is it good? For a litany of reasons. We just read 8 minutes why it is good.
So it's a pretty good answer.
Okay, sure. How does the plan deal with lobbyists and denialist Republicans?
In what sense? Like, how do lobbyists, like
Like,
Are-
how does the plan interact with it?
fiat means that the plan is implemented. There is no lobbyist backlash. If there
Okay.
was an argument about that, durable fiat would probably solve that.
So
Okay,
magic.
sure. Do y'all also fiat that this happens on the local level?
No, our I don't know what you mean by the local level, but like individual states would not have to change their laws to solve the affirmative.
Okay, sure. Why is the plan a good idea?
Why is back to the same question? Like we just read 8 minutes about why the plan is a good idea.
Okay.
There are authoritarian violence, nationalist crackdown, things like massive death
Will
and
y'all
nuclear war.
fiat anything outside of the plan text?
Do we fiat anything outside of the plan text? No, we
Yeah.
fiat the plan text and durable enforcement.
Okay, sure. What skills do we get from your model of debate?
The Barma evidence is pretty good about the skills that allow us to deconstruct norms that are held in the status quo. One such norm that the
So
affirmative
deconstructing norms is good.
in some instances, yes. I'm not gonna make like a broad statement about which norms we should deconstruct, but there are norms that should be deconstructed. The Barma evidence says that scenario analysis allows us to deconstruct them.
Cool.
Okay,
2 case. Just let me know when everyone got it. I sent it. Okay, Lucas, Gene, awesome. First off, with the procedural, this is a test from Bochard and anyone examination. This will go to the verify people find it select objects, responsive to question they ask themselves the objects in order commodity sounds anyone can decipher now appropriate their test, their interrogators, and their answers, including the question, either information or communication about perceptual test, circular response. Next off is the critique, the nostalgia, the first the politics, the what I see, or nothing but an interaction of science and seeming awkward with the culture. This model is unable to address the existential problems of the world. From Lindsay, 12, they indicate different debates of policy, broke ideological organization, the rest of the symbolic and disconnected from societal life. Robotics is able to interact, accessing awkward people, want to do something about how the unable to explain what happens. So we know what to do, not know what we know what to do, we don't want what we want, what is culture. Conservatives and liberals, these are not real politics, that we have cultural politics, that politics and combinations of times. It's simply like how to explain individuals engaging in empty policy, consider nostalgia, institute an intuition about the failure of politics, humanity facing catastrophic risks, nostalgia, something we feel pretty much prepared for. To participate in politics, bounded by this context, urgent issues of risk become topic for culture, thus we see both apocalyptic themes, nostalgia. It's a coping mechanism because we set the future to politics, we treat behavior the old context still exists because we behave this way, does continue to cause politics, is increasingly attacked from the constraints of our existence. This system we're built on a ritualistic fashion despite its inability to address our common problems. The left is falling into traffic, creating counterculture, to simply sell more product while failing to attempt no politics, positive change. Seem like a museum now. It means this passes they still are home contemporary politics flounder because they confront a very different world today. We evaluate their efficacy with this rubric from the past in a moment of political stagnation. We really didn't want it to come to this, but after the 1 season advocacy, and I have no choice but to step in and become the Marxist super innings for this round. We're taking the app and putting it aside. You are getting it back because you don't know what's good for you. Hedonically permissive appeals to fiat health and skills, or empty signifiers of the childish desires that facilitate the addiction to repetitive debates. Only taking the app and allows debaters to break from the cycle of the sameness and nostalgia from Fisher. 09 to super innings, officer lending to get attack on post-modernity of permissive hedonism. Children are unable to recognize their own affairs of fallen pleasure principles. Cause this misery, better suited to that leads them to see their children's have to make capital and relies upon the equation of desire with interest about all the level of production by refusal to do anything to the audiences with the appear to want humans are habitually later repetitive behavior but only be achieved when they set aside the side action that toxic against the capitals particular destruction the inability to help the battle of the intellectual of the family feature we see reduction to an automatic health about feeling limited until people lose weight is acceptable to call for cultural improvement is to be a rise of legend oppression and art the notion that a third party might know someone's interest better than they know themselves under passive simulation generated content that is repetitive parasitic and conformist paternalistic culture treat audiences adults people do not know what they want those powerful that forms the desire critics of the weird these can only be supplied by artists who are prepared to take us the super would believe be the one who laid down limitations act in our interests when they're incapable of recognizing them ourselves but also unprepared to take earth the effect of the cancellation of long-term stagnation and conservatism not innovation the affect that predominantly capitalism are they breed products which resemble those already successful don't more in the 1AC being taken everyone had already made up their minds before the performance debating is only useful insofar as it challenges power the best way to do that is a forced reckoning with the futility of the app M and I know what's best from Roberts in 18 arguments we know there's no good on the other side interest in arguments in fact the truth of right wing tribalism is embodied by Trump this brutal affection of thinking everything is your Trump defending tribal position you all are good by the arguments persuasion any part of this illegal is an deflected views and mislead defense of the status quo to acknowledge climate is new power liberal third Republican Party will simply never do these arguments are secondary to us. Difficult to accept this implies all those hours spent endlessly arguing have been wasted a lot of hours spent by people who good faith that hope that evidence and reason can change my power, not give up power without abundance lose power. Always have their history. They find people to defend their interests. Arguments for scientific, political, or economic to some people there. They make occasional concessions to perform self-identification. They use that circumstances demand, but the status quo is the point, not the argument. The only way it can be overcome through power. I.e., organized political opposition focusing on the worst scrutinizing the Republicans' comments that don't reflect anything deeper. Is just getting played. Their model of debate is a spectator sport that failed to contribute to political power building operations. Their engagement is only a simulation of politics because it's utterly disconnected from the original political environments that structured the one AC. The alternative forces to disconnect from their emotional investment in hobbyism and directly fuels change in the broader community. From Hirsch at all 20, you're doing politics wrong. You think you're doing it right, which means you're making things worth less. Pursuing power, start to treat politics like a spectators sport. All legal hobbies that we participate in news, politics by news, falling off our hot take by emoting and arguing and debating all from behind the scenes. Many of the politically active are doing a little more than sickly. We emotionally invested more, not committed to solving problems. Politics becomes sort of this just doesn't describe how people engage. People spend time arguing are mostly on the left. Hobbyists spend time consuming news. They get with the people there. They mistake it as radical politics, but it's not because it does get you good power. You're learning the wrong information or practicing the wrong skills. You're learning about national items. It's just drama. And hobbyists might learn all the details and feel support to know, spend hours on. But if you have to get involved with the pressure points on influence government, he has no idea the hobbyist is learning the wrong skills, provocation, and signaling outrage. Like really feels the civic duty to participate in state of foreign polity. Find political facts and intellectually gratifying their only role to sleep and build power. It's only if you don't need more power could you conceive of politics as leisure. No one is spending more time learning facts than college educated white men, but real engagement shows it's overwhelmingly women and blacks doing the real work of politics. Plan focus directly trades off with meaningful politics. That sees the political to far right movements and dudes the left to an endless repetition of the same debate because we think we're actually doing something. From Hirsch, 20 treatments of politics is what affects how politics behave. They benefit from being outraged. They're basically constantly grandstanding hobbies and takes away from spending time with those work from working with others who require people who seek control are they winning over, but the KKK went around offering to help opioid addicts. We're seeing political power, but people want more than 3D hobbies. I'm taking 1 minute and away from pursuing power. The power vacuum will be filled. Hobbies was being labeled on the left. They consume news, identifies partisans, engage from the sidelines, street politics as if it were a game. Hobbies on the left stands in contrast to successful movements on the right, which are developed around local organization. Volunteers wonder all their sleep, achieve honest goals, activities that seem beneath the hobbies, infatuated with national drama. Case. We live in a society that thumbs fed from Han at all 20. Covenant share power, authoritarian and anti-Christ people long for strong leaders. Orban is benefiting. We live in a society based on the fear of death and enjoyment of sacrifice. So COVID is not a good omen for the U.S. Asian countries. China will sell its state as a successful model against that dynamic. China will demonstrate superiority with pride. The very virus vaccine change of an era. And Biden just won. He does the plan from Jaeger 20. Biden doesn't worth decriminalizing marijuana. I don't see anyone going. I don't believe anyone should be going to jail for drug use. Wipe out the record. We're going to pass the law saying there's no background knowledge to the use of marijuana. And the plan isn't enforced. OLC court and slow walking from Graham 19. Talk about ways to get around the law. He had office illegal consent, court justification for how they're following the law. The law they don't like is unconstitutional. Obama and Bush did the same. And officers just make different arrests. Drug crimes on a unique conviction rather than part of larger crimes from PLAF 17. Reforms the imbalance of person population driven by imbalances in who lock up for drug. The claim is wrong. Only 60% of people are in prison for their drug charges. If we release everyone in prison, those top charge was a drug offense. The black percentage would fall by 1%. There simply aren't enough drug offenders in prison to have much of an impact. Decriminalization will not reduce overall enforcement. Officers would be reassigned, not laid off, which could increase arrests for non-drug related crime. Any decriminalization legislation paved the way for loopholes, riders, and increased supervision. That turns case from Taki 17. Criminal justice reform focus on incarceration without attempting to reduce that I cast by the system politician like greater use of supervision. The intent of the creator prosecutors role to the net winding by shifting people on a more intense supervision regime. The criminal justice reform result in shift from incarceration to supervision. Companies will be poised to capture the business. This incentive is CCA, core civic and GEO to keep people involved in the system, expanding population that's subject to probation, and returning people to prison through revocation. People not otherwise on probation are placed on indeterminate pay only probation. And doing the accuracy new universes with their impact still have, and they don't do anything. Vote negative presumption from Zimmerman in 17. But many rules around some quantum mechanics, short of predicting compatible states, coin landing on heads and tails would explain that we don't ever observe incompatible states, only heads or tails. That states occur as well, equally rule, but relatively isolated in the world. There are some copies of the universe in which coinlands heads and others tails applies to all physical states. There are some copies of the universe in which you make work and others where these create multiple of the universe at all, branching off from some initial state. And their assumption of democracy and hegemony being good things are rooted in a human aesthetic and that only applies to Western discourse. Societies with distinct histories cannot be conceptualized through this frame. Attempts to do so causes violence. Turns case from Valencia. 10. We can leave human ethics on other with physical actors and other political geographies. This means that society with distinct histories development are with the society with distinct histories development are rooted from reality. Adoption of concepts that always conceptual concepts not inherent, but the result of more process of education and active performance. Understood that we establish a report to describe. We cannot expect the same results from the same variable. Describe exist for concepts. We are unable to confront other dynamics because we're into the matter of the word of the project is legitimate. West the only possibility according to do no harm or the reason for what out and the rule of law that forcing compliance with ethical notwithstanding for the last 5 centuries. The peace of the West was attained through ruthless violence and destruction. Could these vices seems overturned by core capitalism, which are rapidly expanding according to the question no more. And affirmation received no more participate in harmonious ages, no longer expected this affirmation as conceivable for a viewpoint. What's an ethic? Emma, can you pull up the Wilson evidence? I'm gonna read this circumvention card.
Okay.
DOJ lobbying and public harm perceptions make substantial reform possible. Proposal 20. Federal reform doesn't matter. Policymakers not persuaded by policy because they don't want to appeal soft carbon large-scale reforms. Federal reform doesn't matter. Possible to law enforcement. It's a very effective lobbying group. The agenda for policy being set by the DOJ lobbies federal policymakers that strategically advances legislative initiatives. The DOJ lobbies the White House through 3 meetings. Actually, I have it up. There's no single way to escalate Chinese military doctrine as defensive realism mistaken Western and self-orientalized Western discourse and debate of counterproductive from Wilson 14. There's no single Chinese way war tech history and culture series when considering the strategic explanation of Chinese strategy to today believes that Chinese geostrategy is the Chinese way of war no more correct. Correct. I'm gonna send it down.
Okay, you send me one?
Yeah, I'll send the cards that we read.
Okay. It was just the Valencia card and the last card, right?
Yeah, it was just Valencia and Wilson.
Okay.
And then everything that's in the doc.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me know when those cards are.
Yeah.
Because I think Lobo wants them before cross.
Yeah, that would be desirable. Okay. The Wilson evidence is marked in yellow and a much larger font. Okay, those are sent.
All right, you good?
Yeah.
All right. The Biden solves the F card. It just says Biden wants to decrim. Where does it say he can get around Congress?
Yeah, sure. We think that Biden would have enough political capital within the first 100 days to.
What evidence?
Yeah, sure. We think that Biden specifically. You're asking about the decriminalization stuff, right?
Yeah, the Jaeger card. What evidence that he has PC?
Yeah, sure. So we think that presidents, incoming presidents, especially when Democrats have just won the House and Biden will have kind of the first 100 days agenda. We think that Biden will push explicitly for criminal.
Just any evidence that backs this up, or
we can read it in the blog.
Okay, sure. So not as of the one and see hold on a minute. I had another question about the case stuff. Okay, yeah, the FAF card. The officers just make different arrests. Why does that implicate the F?
Yeah, sure. We don't think that the DOJ would shift to cartels. Rather, they would stick on what they are doing right now. Not the DOJ. The DEA would stay on enforcing the current laws, but they would just be they would just be charging people for different
Where does
things.
this card say DEA?
Yeah, sure. We think that it's kind of overall about policing enforcement.
It's actually like hyper specific to a specific criminalization movement in, I am not sure where, but it is only citing one example. I don't know why that gets you to a structural claim, but that's fine. The critique of policy debate, what model of debate does the negative forward?
Yeah, sure. We're going to read an interpretation in the block that says that we think that we should be debating about the political orientations of the AF, as well as kind of like facilitating power building within activity. That's the Roberts evidence.
Okay, what political orientations does the negative defend?
Yeah, sure. We think that instead of debating things about like what the USFG should do and kind of like getting around like massive legal deficits like circumvention by just saying, oh, we'll fiat through that as per 1AC cross-ex, we think that we should be learning skills around like how to deal with the denial of Republicans, how to deal with lobbying. We think that there is a trade-off between these two models of debate. There's the first evidence where the hobbyism directly takes away from these kinds of debates, which is the yeah.
Okay, so how does it inculcate the skills that are necessary to get around large political barriers?
Yeah, sure. We think Clash is awesome, and we are going to say that your model clashes about kind of the wrong things. It breeds the wrong skills. The Hirsch evidence is really good on this question. It specifically talks about how hobbyism is taking people away from real politics by kind of placating them with these fake politics, i.e. people like wrecking Ben Shapiro on Twitter, but that's obviously not politics, doesn't contribute to power building as per the Roberts evidence. The Lindsay evidence kind of makes a structural claim about why we do it, which is we're nostalgic for old politics, i.e. before the bad orange man came, wrecked everything, etc.
Okay. There's like 10 seconds. You good? Prep? Okay. It's 10 minutes at this tournament, so starting that now. Stop at 8:22.
All right. It should be sent. The order is the advantage, the test, and then the K. All right. Does anyone not have the doc open or isn't ready?
Ferris is good.
Okay, great. Case outweighs the collapse of Germany causes fear of influence, which causes rage of both as Russia, China, and other authoritarian powers that ensures nuclear miscalculation, which leads to extinction through nuclear war and net increase in structural violence, the line by line. They say that so quote society thumbs heads. No, we made a unique argument that hedges decline that other people are seeking hegemony now, but the plan is key to solve. That's the right evidence, and this card definitely flows out. It says China is seeking rise now, which is just a reason why the plan is key. They say Biden solved. No, it doesn't. The card is in the context of criminalization, which is not about it in the context of all our bad, which is about legislation. And at worst, he's wishy-washy. The most he'll do is just let states implement their own policies, which is just going to govern. Not anything makes mention about it in a way can the legalization of their like medical research and individual states decide find as long track record incarceration, drug-related offenses, he's ready to commit the circumvention argument. You can group that for the most part. Durable fiat definitely solved. The resolution is should not would. Anything else is infinitely arbitrary. It is arbitrary and infinitely regressive, and the next loses at every round. The predictability is definitely good, and the predictability is good. We like shouldn't be able to option and lose every single round, and the fiat is definitely good. That'll be more on the K debate. I'll do the specific warrants. There's no enforcement card. There's specific to Trump, which they even said he just got Biden just got reelected, which means that it isn't like isn't inherent. The next argument is that the officers don't enforce the rest. What it doesn't take into account our DEA internal link, which says that they definitely shift to other drugs, meaning that they solve the cartel violence even. They solve our impacts even more. The loopholes argument. It's yeah. The next argument is just durable fiat. Like when they blow it up, we should get new answers. The next argument is the next argument, there's no error replication modernity proves we had a preemptive linear intervention with linear and upward to create change transferred 17 chronological theory comes from theory of history chronology as whether time single pattern of linear history is without no modernities linear progressive view historical from modernists because they're granddaughter but other nerds out of setbacks along the way humanity's path is not his own and not cyclic the Valencia turn 3 about hegemony 3 framing issues 1 other identity of hegemony is a world of perfection we have a unique discipline that bias lighting now leads to authoritarian fascism. We just need to win that hegemony is better. The second is that the as a DA to the alternative that is too liberal as a result of failure to maintain which collapses the global order. That's Kagan. Three is pursuit is inevitable decline cause a global war world. 17 could ready for an that the U.S. giving the rules and eventual nation and country dual rethink is their commitments on unraveling long-standing orders are pretty responsive especially when it happens quickly sounds of anger, fear, resentment, resentment, the U.S. strategy is between cover strategy that's not prepared to be challenge a person to anything. Are yeah. Oh yeah. The multiverse argument, it doesn't matter because we only live in one universe now. The alt doesn't attack this, which means it doesn't solve affirmed presumption. Procedural. Zach, what's your favorite color and why? Me and Eugene will go with green because it makes us feel good. If the argument is true, vote affirmed presumption because we're all robots. If they re-articulate this box, we get infinite new one answers. Okay. Interpretation, the application way the plan versus the alternate has to have linked to the plan. It's when it's first, the one is aiming at Scotch and whether should it be a wish away. Their interpretation unpredictably robbed the juicy resolution offense is that he is British in our analysis. It's pedagogically valuable, established a new overtone winner for and lost for theorization, radical features, deconstruction, advised by allowing us to imagine alternate word that was cross-sex and independently turns the audit gets shut down by right wingers and framing. Don't hold us accountable for all violence of the only the violence they can prove the affirmative causes. The section outweighs alternatives, utility, psychological. They relied on genocidal logic and extinction turns all their impacts, not the other way around. We need to be alive in order to fashion the valuable lives. They can win all their offense, but the average slow prerequisite question. That was also the app of the DA to the all on the case hegemony debate. And taking the app away is not a good argument because it encourages bad scholarship. This plan is a good idea. You should definitely vote argument. And warming is irreversible. Only Marcus Phelps with 3 CS and renewables link turns every impact. Grass yellow 16 capitals in the third in the building functions. The new markets, the plan is approving 1 million. Terms of strategy, economic incentives are needed. Fossil fuel infrastructure is the age members globally that economic risk been return and certainly the short term for class strength, climate change, we must remove carbon. We must name short term strategies in a time and period of time transform the entire fossil infrastructure and private public person industrial tech finance markets and using profitable green marketing. CCS solves now. We're in the book of customer breakthroughs and commercialization, but only market solves. GE reports 15 everything calling for CCS means investment in difficult research and energy with an energy companies have invested in CCS is still an evolution of application for new and absorbing the mineral and silicon and neighbors and be tested and confirm its commercial viability development. Permutation do both legalize marijuana and adapt to all. Perm do the all logical and policy point of the alternative, and perm do the plan and all non-mutually exclusive parts of the alter and a double bind as the alt isn't strong enough to overcome the square or can't overcome residual links, and permutation do each. There's no opportunity cost of doing both of our methods of debate in 2 different ways, and fiat is definitely good, so their analysis is pedagogically valuable. That was on the framework flow, and at the top of the K, that's also Barman 16, and fiat as a thought experiment solves all their problems. We don't literally think we are the government and the judges are Congress. We just undergo the same thought experiment as the alternative. The process of imagining a hypothetical result of an action is something that every team uses every time they debate, not unique to our model, but if they win the department evidence, the political arguments turn this impact. And okay. On the framework flow, sorry. I'm sort of going around. Movement learning debate is a key debate for these discussion and eventual activism, engagement in legal debates changes how we as individuals think it's an act and provides a unique spot for the same government and friends. It also routine all participants in the room love and then effectuating each other. See why young people became involved in political policy and engaged in the legislative Latino caucus because the engagement in identifying the strategies to help facilitate government finding common ground and the political involvement that learn how to relate to other working through common goal students and their system organization which can do their advocacy students and their desire for this engagement. We need to keep channeling our power and back on the fiat good debate. Even illusory agency is productive. Imagining possible changes necessary to motivate action. Stroke in Walker 17 and the illusion of Asian, the working space, and efforts to be made in the face of the country. Outcomes are in all this sustained confident invasion, illusion, motivate action, and situations on the system. Sees influence actors are down in which they can serve from us to the necessary positive within academic life and analysis and expectations. Summer is going. If we remember the illusion, we may be ready. And you don't mean to perfection. Keep us going. And even if not, the process of policy analysis, key to portable Alex heard 17 even implies more policy analysis to policy or another critical policy ideas of function also develop texting discipline to think about the analysis on a problem or it's interdisciplinary person and let us bring policy relevant to the problem, but they understand policy making such a policy analysis and anticipate counter arguments for their analyses to recognize alternatives the mental matters of policy analysis advance public debate the problem orientation focus intentional social problem like it's being needed but criticals and the intermediate the ability to understand and interpret on the topic where do you level of like turn and analysis possibly what else are you? Yeah, I have a minute. Okay. Huh? Oh yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Vague alter voter, they must depend on material strategy for changes should be held to the same specificity of the affirmative. Anything else less than just out of 2AC often skewing the debate, drop the team for time and strategy and floating picture of voting issues. Feels off ground and makes us debate ourselves. These are serial policy failure because no one can ever do anything. Definitely regressive because they can pick out of the fifth word of the second chart and it's impossible for us to defend reject the team for deterrence. No, I didn't. Staring back to the slippery slope, justifying something is empirically not the same as causing Goddard and crabs. It's insecurity, signal ability, contraction in North America. It also makes information to be magical incarceration and incantation in the normal log system. President Hitler defining normal log considered China is the notable 25 years opportunity for the discourses by rigorous and criticism of the greatest linguistic body cannot account for Brady represents the facility and condition work cut of the absent work and all lessons credit we demand the public international zoom critiques only a little impact the audience and disruptive all speaking security is not sweep the politics away. We'll send that out right now. Great. Okay. All right. Eugene is sending it out right now. I can start cross 6 if you all are good. Or we can wait. Yep.
We'll wait. How's y'all's day going?
It's fine. What you guys are? Wait, is it like 11 o'clock there?
Yeah, it's 11.
That's probably like something bad with West Coast, but I don't know. This tournament started fairly late, at least for us. But
Yeah, it started like at a reasonable hour for us.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like the school that we get to sleep in. But...
Okay. Eugene said that it should be sent. So
Yeah, I got that. Cool. All right. Good.
Yep.
Wait, hold up. Yeah, okay, cool. Bag alt, why strats you bad?
Because you guys can shift out of 2AC offense. It like structural factors like time and like the negative block mean that
Terminal
time that
impact.
we put into reading terminal impact.
Yeah, terminal
Fairness.
impact skills.
Fairness is an impact. And fairness and education, like
Okay.
if
Neither of those are impacts. Neither of those mean anything by themselves. Like, what is the impact?
Okay, fairness is an impact. Not like you'll obviously make the fairness as an internal link, not an impact argument. But we think that like unfair debate produces like. Do you want to take this? I mean,
Yeah, like even if fairness even if fairness is an internal link, it's an internal link to literally every benefit we get from debate, because as one NC Crossek said, clash is good, which means that we should have a stable floor for contestation.
Okay, cool, that's fair. Yeah, the permutations. Actually, no, this shove and walker evidence. What's the warrant?
sorry, what was that one?
Shove and walker on the K. There's like no warrant highlighted. Like, what's up?
Yeah, no, it says that you'll make this claim that like fiat isn't real. We say that even if fiat isn't real, the process of undergoing those things are like a net beneficial thing. Like even if we don't have agency now, fiat allows us to imagine worlds in which we do have agency, which in tandem with our movement lawyering argument, like is able to make change in the real world outside of debate, which only we have portable skills to.
Yeah. How do you think your parallel universe clone feels about just kind of like casting them off in the 2AC?
Even if we are in a parallel even if we are in a parallel universe, we are in this one right now.
Okay.
B, we don't know if we are. Like,
so people in other universes don't matter.
No, that's okay.
We can't save them.
We can't save them right now. This debate is happening right now. Like, do you know your person in your parallel universe? I mean, I don't, but
Yeah, I text them on Instagram a lot. They're really cool.
cool.
Okay. The durable fiat stuff. Why does it apply to like non-rollback argument? Like, obviously, like, sure, we'll spot you that the plan is implemented via normal means, but why do you get enforcement? Because YC Crossek said that you wouldn't fiat anything outside the plan text. Where does this plan text say enforcement?
Policing.
Yeah. So, like, the plan text specifically says the policing and sentencing, meaning that we impose durable fiat in both of those categories. All four of your circumvention arguments that you made have to deal with one of those two things. Like, I can go through each of them. It's not external to the plan text, but
Your one of your impacts on the 1AC is climate change. If warming is irreversible, like why'd you read that?
okay. The impact turn in the 2AC is advocating for carbon capture, which is quite literally sucking carbon out of the environment. We think that that is the only way to solve, which is like not a contradiction with the 1AC.
Okay, we'll take our 10 minutes to finish. Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute myself. We have 7:10. I'm sending it out now.
You said 7:10, right?
Yeah, 7:10.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw that in the chat.
Thank you so much.
My memory is quite bad, so.
That's okay. I write it down on paper.
Yeah, I've got a second timer for our pro.
That is a level of preparedness we will never achieve.
Well, I don't know.
Technically, the second timer is because I tend to throw my timer around.
It's
So,
actually just Emma's timer that we use for pro.
yes. Okay. The order is gonna go to critique.
Does the overview substantiate its own page?
Nah.
All right, for sure.
You should be fine flowing it straight down.
Okay.
Is anyone not ready? So everyone's good for me to start? Okay, dope. Policy debates are substantive ideology arguments are empty signifiers and politics reduces simulacra the simulation of policy debates centered on the question of should the USFG do the plan or nothing but exercise and nostalgia beyond illustrating debate isn't reflective of politics or praxis instead it becomes a cultural product where we sell images of suffering for balance within a liberal echo chamber. The real world is full of hobbyists and Republicans who would circumvent the plan before it was on the floor sensing the futility. They have retreated the old context of proposing the plan. That retreat locks in existential threats of climate change, technological advancements, resource wars, and unchecked nuclear arsenals, missing the political to the right. They only answer climate change, but nothing else. Don't buy that Trump's thinking reflects how arguments play out. Politics now has to dismiss as fake news or liberal fear mongering. We will never convince the Republicans that climate change is real because humans justify positions beyond truth. That reason for money or maintain the status quo given the polarization of politics. We must break from hobbies and tendencies of political gameplay and offering our hot takes on decriminalizing marijuana may seem like politics, but it's not. And pretending that it trades off with meaningful action every time a judge votes act to enact some policy placates action by affirming sophisticated models of debate that result in serial policy failure by teaching skills that are useless at this and brief passivity, or is that turns case by dooming the plan's hypothetical implementation to gridlock within a partisan government. The alternative resolves all of this often Zach and I step in and take the act from them like super nanny. That's the only way that to break their addiction to repetitive debates on framework proper. Our interpretation is a resolution the same but presumed to be debates should be about competing political orientations to ensure passion in debates because the plan doesn't actually happen. The doesn't overcome inherency. The only thing that leaves us room are the skills garnered by models of debate, which we impact when their model of debate teaches the wrong skills and only serves a few hobbyists outraged by seating the political to the far right. That's the Hirsch evidence. Questions framing discourse and implementation are more important than abstract policy discussions because we already know about the problems where their models of education is not unique at best and actively harmful at worst because it focuses on national drama that will always be too far away for us to utilize their skills, but that precludes discussions of how we can get involved in power building activities. That means only our model can access any of the educational benefits of debate, and we're the only team that's articulated terminal impact and dictionaries are common today. We're resolved from identifying that solves all their offense because they choose their assumption of the methodology, which means they're prepared to defend the parts of the money we generated offerings from, but they can't prove their political orientation towards the resolution is good, then they should lose. Hold the line on new one AR answers on framework. We explicitly front-loaded arguments on money to facilitate more block explanation. We're not reading new offense. Don't punish us for our tricky cross-exes because the locus of the debates and the choice and the nostalgia descent. They've seen the political backwards or passive now because when he sees political politics are only symbolic. They continue articles that have already been written by their authors and ignored by people in power. This reflects on like slacktivism where liberals and conservatives react to the decriminalization of marijuana. The left doesn't attend politics, but rather they create a counterculture premise on being against the status quo or refine it through any sort of concession. The right their model fails to access real politics by giving the impression that politics are hypothetical or instantaneous, i.e. the climate strike. The cumulative effect of this nostalgia is governance failure. The inability to address fascist power structures only breeds more fashion and structural violence returns. In case, then we have another decide the persuasion, decide ideology, funks arguments in politics because actors are motivated by truth or good ideas by their external reasoning like money and power. Fact checking Trump does nothing because Trump doesn't care the proliferation, disinformation, lobbying, and bad faith takes over by all like conservatives figures an infinite into trying to disprove specific and tacit only results in burnout. It's all about that turns the app because information is this way. So there's no benefit to debating about decriminalization of marijuana, but there's a risk of debates about it's the political to the far right movements which locks in extinction and structural violence and the hobbyism to sad. Political game playing directly turns off meaningful politics by reducing politics to spectators with when he reflects political outrage and moralistic grandstanding in the form of virtue signaling they're the Instagram influence who publicly donate to bail funds who and it was popular but never stepped on the streets of protest. Their model takes well-meaning people away from politics by placating their political activism with things that seem like politics, but it isn't. Their intrinsic on hobbyist politics made to address the harms of the one I see. And they say fairness, but fairness is only an internal link to education. They have to win their interpretation to win this, but we impact that was about the idea that we should nihilistically play the game isn't responsive to our offense. Like gamification itself is bad. Fairness specifically operates a form of bad. Breaking links to all of our offensive it is an eminently political space, reducing it to game cultivates and this unseriousness about politics, which justifies the worst forms of apathy towards people who suffer and die from bad public policy. Fiat doesn't address this bad policy, but rather wishes away the problems of the world in a form of moralistic grandstanding, which turns case because the politicians who hypothetically implement your plan circumvent it and make that the impacts worse. More of it is a pure privilege heuristic that should frame how you think about fairness. Only people who don't have a stake in politics can reduce into a game versus the people who know the most about politics are college-educated white men. The people who actually engage in politics are disproportionately women and people of color. The only people who can reduce debate to a game are those with the stake to the status quo, which means it's negative of presumption because they're investing in how things are rather than they actually influence the change. Even if they're correct on how you should view fairness as possible to retain big school speak, cloud judges, charisma, physical appearance, resources, etc. all make debate structurally unfair. Don't let the 1-yard blow of fairness sufficient defense should improve the critique isn't disproportionately unfair and risk of offense meaning prefer on all face any offensive extrapolation beyond the 2 AC set is new shouldn't be evaluated. They on scenario analysis, we impact turn that was above no terminal impact. The money see shifting the overturn window is not impact the internal into political change, and they never explained why that change was good. And they say that extinction outweighs, but no, we turn our impact is extinction. They say warming is irreversible. If this is true, then they don't get their impact on the app. And Garcia says the green cap is key. That's not internal link, and they never read that there's a shift now. No implementation of the plan is a debate of unknown form. The CCS stuff, it is power tagged. It never says in the evidence that it solves, and then it never says that it solves now, but that it's key. They say debate is a game of the hobbies and did this that impact trends decided above all just a more contextual analysis here. The de-evolution of politics to a game is actively harmful and surprising. Produces stances like adults can be friends regardless. Politics and politics are important to me. That overlap like blatant sexist, racist, xenophobic stances taken by the race of the political spectrum instead of opting for a good faith evaluation of both sides. When in reality, left is usually just correct. But things like outside the election played out like a game of simulation of politics. People hedging bets on the ballot, and Pennsylvania anxiously tweeting about it as if it were halftime or a football game. And putting memes in Trump's response to the election. The conceptual politics is a game choice of meaningful activism. I ain't learning how to lobby the government. Nothing they said proves the debate is a game. Rather, it proves the debate is what we make of the format. Our interpretation turns debate into a space for organized political deliberation, which is net better. I did all of that above and the skills of hobbies and decide impact turns is there. Model garners are wrong skills, which see the political to the far right movements and trade off with political praxis. All that analysis above, even if their skills are good, they can never be utilized. Look at Jordan Peterson losing debate to Zizek and refusing to reevaluate his beliefs, or Ben Shapiro failing to answer simple questions from the BBC and News and making another episode of Ben Shapiro show the next day. This happens because conservative figures don't care about facts, so they have an investment in maintaining the status quo, and their interpretation results by facilitating power building. Onto the links. If we win framework, we don't need a large risk of a link, but here's a ton of really damning links anyway. The simulation link, the one he sees a simulacrum utterly disconnected from real politics. The presentation of the plan is something being enacted via the ballot mirrors politics and media where people share petitions on good ideas. They fundamentally misconstruct politics by assuming endorsement and idea translates to action. The one I will try to recontextualize this is a link to fiat, but I'll be super specific here. It's a link on how the plan was presented. Their politics are empty, signifies a cultural product with the left self-images of sufferance for the ballot. If they think the app is a good idea, they link because it proves the construction of what it was intended to be a culture product for nostalgic consumption. And the limits link. The one is politics are bounded by context of resolution, the use of G. That's because the nostalgic for the way things used to be, the desire to limit political action to a certain defined criteria precludes the effective politics instead of reducing politics to objects for culture. Give me a sec. I am good whenever y'all are.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Is debate a liberal activity?
Sure. That's not necessarily our argument. Our argument is that like leftists will never be able to have method debates with each other because they already agree with something that is true. I.e., y'all are standing up and saying it is should or should we not do the plan. Rather, we say that is a bad form of politics, and instead it should be how we implement the plan because
Sure.
all it should be.
Okay. How does taking the F from us resolve that?
Oh, right. That's the Hirsch. Like the Hirsch evidence is specifically isolates that like if we keep having like these repetitive debates and we just like have these hobbyistic tendencies, nothing will ever change. And then the Fisher evidence says that unless we take something that we know is bad for you away, then it won't resolve. Zach?
Yeah, sure. The Fisher evidence is pretty contextual about how breaking from the cycle is enough. We think our framework interpretation supplements the alternative and can act as an alternative alone, where we reinterpret debate to facilitate political power building as per the Roberts evidence.
Okay, so your framework interpretation. Okay, that makes sense. The simulacra just said, I'm just confused how this doesn't link to y'all too. Like, how are you not displaying information?
They all have the political backward. We say that just consuming news articles that have already been written and already ignored does nothing for us besides just like reacting to liberals and conservatives online. We said that the only way to break down from this nostalgic behavior is to disrupt it at its core, which is policy debate.
Okay, that makes sense. The persuasion just said, the link argument that you did above it, I just didn't catch that. What was the name of it?
The persuasion just said is the Lindsay stuff and the Robert stuff.
Or sorry, the one that you did before that.
Nostalgia just said.
Yeah, the
Nostalgia just said, okay.
evidence.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool. Do any of y'all use your skills outside of debate? Like, do you use what you learn in debate outside of round?
That's not our argument. Our argument is saying that unless we have method debates on how we should implement things, that's not going to happen. Sure, in my English class, there was a lot of talk about, oh, is Trump good or is Trump bad? But that like discussion doesn't break down from how we solve the problem. Like we need to be like discussing at its roots.
Yeah.
Okay, then how does discussing
like the skills that you may implement in like Emma's example of an English class may seem like politics, they may feel like politics, they aren't because they don't contribute to power building. That's the
how does yeah, that's great. How does your method debate like spill up to governmental action? Or does it at all?
Say that like debaters, because we don't engage in method debates, we ultimately fail when we try to go out in the real world. But by breaking this nostalgic system, we are able to go out into politics and engage in how we should do something rather than just like complaining that we need to do something.
All right, cool.
Okay.
It's gonna be K, the test, case. And I'm sending the doc now. Okay. Is everyone ready? Emma, can I steal water for a second?
It's like empty, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Gene, good. Alex, cool. The health link. They've made appeals to hedonic models of health that focus on things like feeling good, i.e., give us the ballot and we'll stop Chinese hegemony from causing extinction. These models are an example of a capitalist permissive hedonism that leads to the stagnation in the long term because they're habitually enslaved to repetitive behaviors like reading plans over and over again and refusing to believe that they might just be futile. Their appeals are uniquely harmful because they don't know what they want, which directly reifies the status quo. They think it's acceptable to tell you how to solve for Chinese hegemony, but it's not acceptable to call for genuine improvement in the status quo. We can tell them that their model is bad. We can't do anything about it. That's absurd and fails to resolve any of our offense because only by acknowledging that someone might know better than you. What's best can improvement be achieved? They have to let go of the 1AC and let us take it. And so hold on or links the game playing like their interpretation of debate is a link in itself. The herd jump specifically cites how playing political games is bad because they play game political movements. We become like the leftist version of change my mind. No minds are actually changed. No politics are influenced by people feel as if they've done something smart. College kids spending their time debating with Stephen Crowder directly trades off with influencing politics. Two warrants. First is that by debating Crowder, there is a literal time trade-off. Second is that these debates play out like it is because we think that we've convinced the judge that Chinese hegemony is bad, when in reality we already know there's no bright line in relation to how much education is needed to access their impacts on framework, which means you should be skeptical of all their analysis on why game playing is pedagogically valuable. In contrast, we have read evidence from political scientists that says game playing is counterproductive form of political engagement that seeds the real politics. The far-right groups like the literal KKK, I don't think we need to explain why the KKK having political power is really, really bad. The alternative stuff, the alternative alone is the only way to resolve our offensive, and I really didn't want it to come to this, but you left us no choice. We're taking the app and putting it aside. That forces debaters to reckon with the utility of their politics and creates a new space for political engagements. Humans are habitually enslaved to repetitive behaviors, but emoting negative breaks down those habits by clearly laying limitations to facilitate better political discussions within debate. The 2AC never read Kondo bad. Judge kick is logical extension of conditionality, which means you can judge kick the alternative. They have offense against it and evaluate framework debate as the alternative. The permutations group that first, the permutation is logically incoherent. The alternative is take the app from them. They can't have something and not have it at the same time. That's the non-contradiction principle of logic. Second, the 2AC never explained how the permutations function. Purdue poll is not an argument, it's a voting issue. Vague permutation texts are impossible to answer the block before closes clash in favor of late breaking debates because any in-depth explanation of the permutation is inevitably new in the 2A. That sidelines our ability to engage the affirmative politics because we don't get a 3 and R reject the team to remedy the damage. Third, no perms. The superintendent lays down limitations to facilitate better debates. Emma says no perms. Sorry, but you don't know what you want, so we have to protect you from their self. Fourth, it's a link. Permutations are only coherent insofar as debate is a game. The Hirsch evidence says that there is a direct trade-off between political power building and game playing. They never read evidence that there isn't, so you default negative on yes trade-off, which means the permutation can't resolve any of our offense because the damage was done in the 1AC by forcing us to debate about whether the USNG should do something as opposed to our political orientation towards the resolution. Fifth, it's severance from the political orientation of the apples. The 1AC was an amalgamation of science and simulacra and theory and nostalgic politics. We generated offense from that. That's above. The one and then you change post 1AC makes clash impossible. That's prerequisite to effective political engagement. Rejected demons. Bad practice. Sixth, the interpractive simulation is how they conceal their simulation of politics behind the alternative, allowing them to continue their simulation with impunity. From Fisher, 09 anti-capitalism, disseminated capital, gestural anti-capitalism, forces and take while you have an aversion of vision of capital, community, and voter understood subjugation, advises the interactive participate while you have their passivity, the real performance are anti-capitalism, force aligned to participate, consume with impunity. The role of ideology is conceal the operations of capital do not depend on the subjectively assumed belief that capitalism can perceive perfectly well that anyone in case for so long as we believe the capitalism is bad, we're free to participate in capital in capitalist exchange. And
Vague alts and
big one is not a pick. We never claim to solve the affirmative. If they can't point to a specific part of the alternative they claim to solve the affirmative is not a pick. Default to reject the argument. Now the team framework acts as the alternative. The vague alt stuff. No, that's not the case. The alternative explanation solves all their offense. It's not a reason to reject the team. If anything, reject the argument. Fairness is an impact. If we win the framework debate, none of these theory arguments matter because all theory only operates within their model of debate. Case.
The test.
Oh, test. Congratulations, you passed the test. We aren't going for it, but presumption definitely goes negative because the status quo is always a desirable option. If the 1AC does nothing, they don't get anything. If we want a thesis level indent of the affirmative, i.e. what I'm going to go for on the case debate, they don't do anything. You vote negative on presumption. 1% risk isn't good enough. They have to actually solve their impacts. The case. Extend the Han evidence. Luke is really trying here, but it's not responsible. Right doesn't answer it, and Han definitely goes negative. It says that Chinese hedge is inevitable because of survival society and COVID. They don't resolve any of those internal links to China hedge, which means it's definitely inevitable, and their impacts happen regardless. Means they don't do anything. We are going for the Biden stuff, and we are going for the decriminalization stuff. They say durable fiat the tax convention. No, they get the plan. Nothing else. They never specify an enforcement mechanism or who does it, which means all of our circumvention arguments are still flying. That's the most fair because anything else justifies extra. Anything outside the plan justifies extra topicality, which makes clash impossible, which is bad for political engagement. They say that no enforcement specification stuff is key to Trump, but no, it's not. It specifically says that the Obama administration, which Joe Biden was a part of, also circumvented it, which means they don't get it. The Valencia stuff, it turns case. The Valencia stuff, it definitely turns case because defensive realism isn't real. The Wilson evidence explains Chinese island building as part of a historical materialist approach, but as something that hegemony is always bad, justify violence, and actually turn case by causing the violence by importing violence onto other cultures.
Okay, 8:22 starting now. Okay, I stopped at 4:30. Give me 1 second to stand up. There aren't cards, I believe. No. Okay. It is the advantage and then the K. Doesn't matter. Baywin's not good. Verbally cut me off. Ferris, you all good? Alright, cool. Retrenchment causes. My timer didn't start. Retrenchment causes extinction. No impact defenses in the block means if we win a 1% risk of defense of the K, then we outweigh. It leads to great power war over spheres of influence with Russia and China, each of which goes nuclear. Even a limited nuclear war is sufficient to become an existential catastrophe. That's a bomb evidence. Extinction is the foremost ethical priority. First, it turns the K, it kills everyone on the plane, which is horrendous material violence, and material violence is ultimately their terminal impact. Second is future life. Trillions of people can come into existence in the future, but extinction forecloses that value. It's irreversible, so if you have any uncertainty, you should err affirmative. Hegemony is desirable and sustainable, but not inevitable. We have forwarded a uniqueness claim that says authoritarian blacksiding is occurring in the status quo due to failure to maintain hegemony. They have conceded that the alternative can't solve this and that extinction outweighs, which means that if we win, the affirmative solvency logically outweighs the first argument. Their evidence is literal world salad. It says literally nothing, and maybe China is doing something good now, but it certainly doesn't say that they've overtaken the U.S. or that it's inevitable, does it? Assume a world of the affirmative in which the U.S. is able to recommit to hedge, which is a conceded internal link argument. COVID doesn't kill hegemony, and Biden gives us another shot at it. Even if it does, we definitely get to durably fiat the executive. This solves all of their executive circumvention arguments because the executive is part of the USFG, but there's no enforcement because the DEA couldn't enforce anyways, even if the executive rolled it back. The bottom arguments weren't extended enough to give it to them, but we have forwarded nuance and specificity in defense of hegemony, which no links all of their arguments, which presume that we made sweeping claims at the K at the top. 3 framing issues that make it pretty impossible to vote next. First, the F is a dissent to the alternative. That's a conceded 2AC argument. They have no method for spill up, which means that even if we can't weigh the F in a traditional sense, or they kick the alternative, we will win. Their model of debate is bad because it eschews liberalism. Second, their thing is a tautology. Their proposed method is a debate about method, which eschews legal nuance and necessary to build movements. Even if they're right about legalism, they can't solve it because they defer the solution, infinitely talking about methods. Third, capitalism is good. Impact turns the thesis of their model, even if there's no alternative, because they eschew capitalism. They miss the boat on this. We've emitted too much right now, and even if law was instituted today and we all stopped emitting, we'd already be in way too deep. Try or die for sucking carbon out of the atmosphere using CCS means any method that eschews capitalism, i.e. the negative, should be rejected on face because it cements warming, which leads to extinction, massive structural atrocity. Yes, it does say it's the evidence is surprisingly good, but you didn't read a piece of evidence. Only ours is predicative. It is coming now, but that doesn't really matter because I just try or die. I'll do the links to make proper below, but just so they don't say I dropped anything. 1, it's not spectatorship, which no links the majority of their offense. We have a specific strategy for change in defense of marijuana, reform, capitalism, and hegemony. Second is perm to each. Some people can do game playing, and some people can have forms of method discussion. Solves all of their offense because all of it is premised off of trade-off arguments. Third is reject arguments on team. The alternative is vague, which justifies vague permutations for 1, the 2, and C clarifies, but they also said reject arguments on team, so that's the worst case scenario. Can't turn to case 1, they can't generate uniqueness. Second is that realism is inevitable. That's a conceded 2AC argument. We meet their framework interpretation, which is the entirety of the 2NC. Our model of politics is one where marijuana should be legalized, which means that you get to evaluate that versus your model of politics and meet their interpretation outwards. Their subjectivity offense group it. They didn't answer the nuance of any of our arguments. Ace point is scenario analysis. It's pedagogically valuable, enables imagination creation of alternative futures, which allows us to break current social scripts like the ones that say that marijuana users are deviants who should be arrested. Their affirmative is able to reverse that script. Basil point is movement lawyering. The legal nuance is necessary to making sure that people can advocate for things beyond the home, which leads to actually changing the law, which is pretty much the only terminal impact of the critique. Cecil point is fairness. It's a floor for value, even if it's an internal link. It's an internal link to literally everything, because as the 1NC put it, clash is good. Resolution is the only way to ensure clash, because it's the only thing that says announced ahead of time and both of the teams know we're debating means if we win that they're non-resolutional, then we win the debate. Their only answer to the fairness arguments is the redefinition of the word resolve, but that doesn't really matter because the resolution, the word should indicates desirability, which means that we should just, all we need to defend is the desirability of the plan. Now, group the backlash argument, no impact or it's inevitable. The right wing backlash is no matter what. It's a question of leftist organizations start this argument because it means all of their offense is inevitable. Information is dissuasive. Stop group that there's no warrant, no evidence, or no argument, so I shouldn't have a high bar for answering it. Reality is existence, knowable. Risk calculus 101. If it doesn't exist, then you vote off on presumption because nothing matters. And if it does exist, then the affirmative is a good idea. The hobbyism stuff, group it. We don't make debate a spectator sources where we've proposed a specific strategy. The political stuff was answered above. The movement learning stuff, impact turns this perfectly durable. The outside circumvention that was on the case page. Now group the next argument. It's not apathetic. It forces radical solutions and debates about specific strategies. Sure, debate is again, but that doesn't make it bad. They have to explain things like spreading RFDs, prep sheets, or speech times in order to win any other alternative model of debate. The simulacra itself was largely answered above, so were the rest of the link arguments of the one in R. But what the fuck is an empty signifier? I don't think this is explained at all in the 2 and C, so you shouldn't let the 2 and R recharacterize. The last argument was answered above. That's all we need to win.
We'll take our 710 of prep, start that now. Okay, that's prep. Oh no, I spilled water on my flow. Hopefully I can read it.
You should be fine.
It's fine. Okay.
It's on the 2AC.
Okay.
I hope that no 2AC arguments make a surprise reappearance in the 2AR.
Okay.
I mean, have you never seen a 2A before? Of course they will.
I get it, Lucas. I'm with you. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, you know?
We shall see, yeah.
Okay. So, the the order is gonna go case and then the critique. Ooh. Is everyone good? Okay, cool. But in circumvents the plan court, slow walking and complete lack of enforcement. He'll simply say the plan is unconstitutional. Shift enforcement mechanisms to things like rehabilitation centers. When the DA doesn't shift focus in his negative presumption, I'll do more of that on the critique. But remember, they didn't fiat the plan text proper. The one error didn't answer, which means that they can't fiat enforce and durable. Fiat isn't good enough here because it's a roll back argument. Presumption goes negative. This was new in the 1 AR, and they said the critique turns out this case their apologies for nothing but nostalgia because fiat is illustrating truth doesn't matter there. And assistance of implementing plan box and existential threats and structural violence, which they never answer because the skills created by their model are useless at best and brief political passivity at worst. They say the framing of the opposite is that this explanation is new in the 1 AR, and if we win framework, it's negative presumption because they don't get the affirmative. They say that we assume liberalism know that this is not an impacted and it does not link back to ourselves like capitalism is good stuff. This was not clear to see and blowing up in the 1 ARs really silly, but our Fisher evidence we read in the block answers that the effects of capitalism are stagnation and conservatives and not innovation trends away from Biden and Bernie prove. They say that there's no spectatorship, but that's the hobbyism stuff. I'll do more of that now. Our counter-interpretation resolution is same or presumed to be true because Rosami's determined debates are about competing political orientation. The resolution, those are predictable because when you see chosen some of the terminal impact of politics, we have impact turn there. Not only our framework facilities, power building operations within debate, but challenges right-wing movements. That always help you. More on the line behind they never answered the nostalgia dissent, and nostalgia turns it outweighs case because they see the political backwards and model debate is nothing but the regurgitation of scholarship that was already written and already ignored, which means their education offense is not unique because we know the problems of the world, and it's only a question of how we orientate ourselves to them. Calvert Hall BL's orientation is that of leftist counterculture premise and selling images suffering for ballots, which gives the impression that politics is hypothetical. That views of politics results in government's failure and extinction for two reasons. They the political orientation when I see real redefine status quo trend towards fascism by conveniently pushing it aside instead and don't need this nostalgic liberal delusion politics can suffer within the bounded context of fiat and what the USFG should do. Voting out completes ritual policy debates which are increasingly detached from real politics instead of simulate politics. That simulation fails to attend real politics because fiat doesn't overcome inherently positive changes the museum in their model. It's a negative presumption even if you don't buy our offense, but our offense is damning failure to substantially address politics within debate accumulates extinction because they don't actually challenge status quo and B. The fiat implementation what he sees is undesirable if they win from because of all their solvency evidence operates within a nostalgic context. Fascism doesn't go away if we pass a plan. Rather, fascists are the ones who control the plan, which means it inevitably gets circumvented and turned into an excuse to pass more violent policies and make structural violence worse. That turns case, and that was on the case flow. And they say reject all that's vague. It's not vague. Block explanation solves, and there's no more as to why you should reject the team. Don't let them blow it up. And they say the marijuana stuff should be wait. They didn't explain this. They don't. That was in the block.
They get their assumptions, not the substance.
They get their substance, not the assumption. And the hobbyism is that this should be the first thing you evaluate because if we know how is a hobbyism debate, nothing else matters. Political game playing terms of politics, because to play cases the 2 AR it's gonna say no, go for the permutation, get out of this, but it won't work for two reasons. A, framework comes first. If we win at these level and done their model permutation, the severance is a reason to reject the team because it makes political deliberation impossible. They didn't answer a clash. Should come first because it's the key to actualizing effective policy. Permutation links back to all of our offense because it's only coherent within the defines of a game which we impact. If we win from they don't get the permutations. That was B. Their models produce Instagram influencers donate ballots to bail funds, but never set a foot in streets of protest. They're able to more realistically grain some, but the usage should do outwardly feeling to influence politics writ large. There's two negative ballots. First, politics they have read warrants as to how their model produces effective political practices, which is only clear impact articulated in around it turns an outweighs case because there's a trade-off between gameplay and politics. They dropped it. Don't let the 2 AR gaslight you thinking otherwise. That's damn you have to pull the trigger on because gameplay creates a power vacuum and inevitably gets filled with alright, that locks in fascism, climate change, resource wars, and structural violence, which always any reason game playing is good on time frame and magnitude. If they're right with the skills they garner, you are good, you should still fund it because they can't actually skills for at least 5 years during the time the KKK is building political power. Only our framework for political power building operates to a occur right now. We can debate the movements about spring from our framework results are often means we don't need to win the alternative. Second, presumption their models and facilitating that benefits most of that work was on the harsh evidence, which was still a big debate from behind the scenes. They were actualizing and material benefits. Those like skills or education, but we answer that skills are useless because they can never be implemented. Education is only an internal link to politics. They aren't reasons to prefer the framework alone. If you articulate any impact or knowing more things that's political change proves our argumentation, you vote negative.
The alternative stuff.
The alt. We're kicking the alternative. It's conditional evaluate framework as the alternative because the results are often facilitating power building and debate just in case the two error goes for the permutation. It's in the inner passive simulation to say that they drop the permutation allows them to continue simulation and impunity by concealing the simulation behind the alternative, which means that they can't resolve our offensive view the alternative as framework, which we are winning. They say fairness is an internal. They drop the resolution calls for a method debates and they say that we don't have any more. We are. We don't have to explain empty signifiers. Just ask us in cross-ticks. I don't have time.
Okay, for 30.
Okay. That is time. Case K. All right. Anyone not good? Cool. Okay. There's really only two things we need for you to have an ask ballot. First is that we solve hegemony and extinction outweighs, and second is that you should evaluate consequences of the plan we functionally impact turn their model debate, which we're ahead on, but that'll be more on the K-flow. The advantage hedge collapse outweighs causes a fear of influence which emboldens Russia, China, and other authoritarian powers. That ensures nuclear miscalculation will lead to extinction through nuclear war and a net increase in violence. Extinction outweighs. They've functionally conceded this. It's try or die. They've functionally conceded the impact framing, but even if it doesn't, the impact turns the K, but not the other way around. Hedge prevents structural violence. That was on the overview. It doesn't matter if there's a huge risk of their theory or power being right, because if extinction outweighs, it's try or die to solve it. The only argument I have floated in the advantage is separate from the case that by and circumvent. This should have zero risk in your RFD. Durable fiat definitely solves. The plan that says USFG enact Biden is a part of the USFG, which means he has to enact it. Any other alternative, it means and it means Av will lose every single round because should not would the fiat debate will be more in the framework flow. Okay. Two issues that make it impossible to vote negative. First, we meet their interpretation. Their explanation as to why the negative did was a political methodology, was that what the affirmative did was for the specific method that says marijuana should be legalized and the hegemony and capitalism should be upheld isn't enough. They've just asserted we only get our assumptions. There are two answers. A is that we assume that marijuana should be legalized. That means weigh the F, and B is that there's no basis, there's no warrant for why that's predictable. They've conceded predictability is a floor for Clash, which is their only impact. So this turns all their offense. And if they're right that this is a debate about nuance and methods, then this is an absolute crush. They didn't extend any method, which means we only need a small risk of case. And second is that the app is a disaster framework. It isn't new. Check your 2AC flows on the case page. They didn't really explicitly answer it in the one and R. Any framing that excuse debates about upholding hegemony and capitalism leads to inevitable extinction. The 1AR was explicit that this is an indicted of their framing, so it doesn't matter if they didn't go for an alt or we don't get to weigh the app. I'll do our offense here. Our interpretation is that the app gets to weigh the plan versus the alt, and the neg has to have links to the plan. That's good for two reasons, but they kicked the alt, which means that they definitely don't meet our interpretation. First is fairness. The 1AC was 8 minutes on why the app is good. Taking that away dicks any competitive balance because the neg always has more speed time that plays into our FD. It's a prerequisite. Even if the case is predictable, taking the 1AC away isn't framing issue. Floor fairness is a floor for value. If we win them, their model is not resolutional, then we can't clash with their method, which means that they can't solve any of their offense because all of their offense is about clash being about warfare being good, which only we have a method for sustaining. And second is movement lawyering. Only access and legal solutions to real world problems can overcome any difficulties present in the status quo. That'll be later in the debate. Debate is inherently isolated, placed in a vacuum, but only our model debate allows us to actualize these differences after we leave the room. They straight dropped the movement lore. The analysis on the movement stuff was really shallow, and all the high level analysis Eugene did in the 1AR was conceded. Even if we don't literally go out and become policymakers, it's still good for research and advocacy skills because it helps us conceptualize the world, which turns any subject formation off. Sorry. Yeah. And first framing issue, I'll do the defense here. First framing issue, our offense is relatively unmitigated, which means that I only need to own a small defense of their framework arguments, unless you can tell me that there's 100% risk of every DA that they logically can outweigh the hobbyism arguments. A, they don't link to us. We propose a debate with sustained nuance over the intricacies of legal solution, which means that we can solve them. It probably links harder to their interpretation because their interpretation is an infinite series of debate that has no method of spilling up. If there was ever debate hubris, it's here. They think it's more important to talk about the rules of the game than and specific consequences, and B, there's not an impact to this. There's no explanation of how defending legal solutions is a bad idea or why it leads to any form of increase in violence. Write your RFD based on the 2 and R, not the block, because I can only logically explain answer arguments that they extended warrants for. I'll extend perm due each briefly for a second because we explicitly said it solves the trade-off links. It doesn't matter if they kick the audit, it still makes sense. Some people still have method debate. Severance is a reason to reject the argument, not the team, but it's incoherent because perm due each advocates for the entirety. Yeah, broken negative presumption. It doesn't make any sense to me when that our model debate is good. And the education, non-unique, and violence arguments aren't really explained, but they are defense at best. There's only risk that we solve it, and the fiat double bind seems to make a surprise guess appearance, but it wasn't in the block. Doesn't matter. We can't literally implement the plan. Fiat makes us less racist, better lawmakers. That's the framer flow. If you're winning that, then we win. Cap good. They don't have a piece of evidence on the CCS debate, which means that the cross evidence indicates that warming is inevitable and irreversible. Let's go. We've gone too far, which means too much carbon in the atmosphere. It means it's try or die for developing carbon storage. Only capitalism can solve 2 implications. One, it impact turns their method of framework. We impact turn the out-of-round skills that they provide. And second is an internal link turns the method for achieving out-of-round skills. Warming is inevitable, which means that their alt is doomed to extinction. That turns their impacts. We've turned their methodology debate from the Kepka debate. We don't even have to yeah, okay. Good debate.
There you go. Good debate.
Good
That was
debate.
really fun.